Hey guys, Chris from Hockey Tutorial here, and today we're going to be taking a look at skate blade holders and what is the main difference between them. So to start off with, we're going to take a look at the Bauer Tuuk LS2 holder. The reason we're going to start off with this one is because it's the most popular holder on the market, for good reason. We'll touch on some of the differences between them in just a minute. But the way the holders work, what makes a good holder and what makes a bad holder is manufacturers being able to establish the perfect length and the perfect height off the ice. The higher the holder is off the ice, that ties into your agility, and the longer the holder is on the ice, that ties into your gliding ability and also your speed. If it's a nice long holder, it'll be good for gliding and speed, but if it's fairly short, it won't be so good for gliding and speed, but it'll be good for tight turns and overall agility. So being able to find a balance between the length of the holder and the height is incredibly important, because it can sort of be the difference between having a really good responsive holder or having a very sluggish and slow holder, or having a fast holder that's really bad at turning. So Bauer have been able to sort of distinguish the ideal or perfect height and length, which is what they refer to as the optimal height and length for their holders, which gives them very, very good performance and is why that they're the preferred holder on the market. Moving to Easton at the top here, and also quickly mentioning CCM in this, is that CCM, Reebok, Easton sort of try and copy or mimic the styling and the sort of layout of the Bauer LS2 Tuuk holders, which is one of the reasons that it makes kind of being able to distinguish the difference between the holders on the market now so difficult to sort of be able to do. Everyone's copying everyone now to sort of get the same results, to give their customers the same feeling, so it makes it very, very difficult to distinguish the difference. But one of the things that we did notice is coming a little bit off the blade, coming off the holders, is with the blades when compared to the sort of styling on the Bauer LS2 blades and holders, is that Easton have a much bigger portion of the blade poking out of the bottom of the skate than Bauer do, and that's one of the reasons that the Eastons aren't as agile or aren't as comfortable to skate on as the Bauer LS2 Tuuk holders, and also the blades, which is something to keep in mind. Same with CCM as well. But moving on to the overall structure of the holder, if you look around the midsection over here, you can see that Easton have used a lot less material, and one of the reasons that they do that compared to the Bauer LS2 Tuuk holder is because they say that it gives you a strategic flex when the holder's put under masses of torque, which is one of those things that manufacturers say that's like, really, can we actually prove that? Can you actually feel the benefit of them even including that feature in, if it is true? Which is one of the reasons Easton can be a bit temperamental, because they do say that they have a lot of features that are new and unique to them, but it's almost impossible to be able to actually test and prove those features actually work. So keeping that in mind, with the CCM holders, they're pretty much identical. If I bring it a bit closer to the Bauer LS2, you can see that it's pretty identical to the Bauer LS2. They have sort of tried to change the styling a little bit. As I said, everyone's copying everyone nowadays, which makes it very, very difficult to distinguish the difference between them. But again, CCM and Reebok's holders are very, very similar to the LS2 holders. The height is very similar, the length, but the CCM holders are still a bit shorter. They're not at so much of an aggressive upright position over here, meaning that this is the back of the holder over here. The holder sort of sits slightly lower than it would if it was the Bauer LS2 Tuuk holders. That would be a little bit higher and a little bit more aggressive, which again is one of the reasons that skaters like them, because it puts you in that nice aggressive stance, which makes skating a lot more comfortable and keeps you nice and on your toes for good acceleration, etc. So that's one of the reasons that these holders are very, very well liked on the market. Now moving on to another point of the holders that is incredibly important is going to be the bolts that you can see over here. The reason I thought I'd mention this is because with the Bauer LS2s, it's nice to see that you don't have any bolts over here. It kind of keeps the holders very, very durable, long-lasting. But one of the problems is if you do get a broken blade, you have to drill a hole in the base of the skate, if it's not a Bauer skate that you've got the holders fitted to be able to switch out the blade. As you can see, the bolt is going to be underneath the heel, so that's something that's annoying. If it's a Bauer skate, they normally have the holes pre-drilled so you can just gain access to it, but if they don't, that's something to keep in mind. So if you're in the middle of a game and your blade snaps, you can't change it out quickly, which can be a problem for some. You can see Easton have the bolts over there, so they're nice and easy to switch out. You can literally just undo the screws, fit in a new blade, takes 10 minutes and you're ready to go back on the ice. With Graf, the screw to remove their blades is on the back over there, but one of the things I will mention about the Graf holders, which I've heard from a few stores, is that Graf put their blades under too much tension, so they really try and stretch the blade when they plug it into the holders or hook it into the holders, which makes them more prone to snapping down the middle, which is a point to mention. So to sort of reduce the chances of this happening to you, when you get your Graf skates, just undo the blade with the bolt at the back there, take the blade off and put it back in yourself, just to make sure it's not being put under too much strain. So that's a point to mention. Now coming to the Easton E-Pro holders, again they have the bolts on the side so you can switch out the blades nice and easily if they snap. A quick 10 to 5 minute job. But the problem with having these bolts on the sides, which is a massive, massive problem, and which happened to me with my Reebok skates not too long ago, is that you can be skating, not doing anything too aggressive, and these bolts on the Easton E-Pro holders will simply come out and get lost, which is really annoying. So it means that you have to check these bolts if you have them on your skates to make sure that they are still secure. I'd probably recommend checking them each time you get on the ice, which can be a bit annoying, and again is one of the reasons why these holders over here are the preferred. So of course we're not going to be leaving Graf out. Graf are, I believe personally, are one of the best manufacturers on the market because they've been doing what they've been doing for an incredibly long time. None of the other manufacturers have been making skates as long as Graf, and also to the quality that Graf have been making their skates too. Taking a look at the holders, I normally recommend Graf skates for very powerful, very big skaters because their top end skates are by far, like there is no arguing, they are the stiffest on the market. They're like concrete. If you look at the Graf G75s, those boots do not flex, they do not move, they are so stiff. You have to be very powerful and sort of very aggressive on your skates to be able to get those skates to do what you want them to do. So they're great for big, heavy, strong, powerful skaters. You can see the holders are incredibly solid. They don't have any sort of unnecessary gaps in them. Everything that Graf do is for a reason. They don't do things for styling, they don't do things for a visual appearance. It's all sort of technical things that they do on their skates, which is one of the reasons that I like them so much. These are incredibly stiff and rigid holders which require well-experienced, good, strong, powerful skaters to use when you're looking at Graf's top-end skates. Obviously their intermediate skates and their lower-end skates are a bit more forgiving, but Graf are probably one of my favourite brands as I like sort of more traditional things. But I do respect Graf and believe that they should be getting a lot more attention and a lot more respect than they do, because they don't bother about different marketing gimmicks like Bauer do. They just focus on the product, and it's one of the best made products on the market. Definitely better than Bauer and Reebok and CCM, so these would be a good brand to look out for as well. But their holders are not, I can't really compare them to the LS2s. Their holders are pretty unique to the way they build them, but Graf skates and the way the holders designed would be good for your agile skaters, good for very powerful, fast skaters because of the nice length of the blade. So overall, Graf are a really good brand, and they are definitely completely, they stand alone when compared to the, the CCM, the Reeboks. Their boot feels completely unique. The way that holder and blade feels on the ice is also very different to the other manufacturers, so that's another one to look out for. But a point I will mention is Graf are like Marmite. You either love them or you hate them, so that's a point to keep in mind as well. But I definitely recommend more people look into Graf. So what we're going to take a look at in this part of the video is one of the things that a lot of skaters and hockey players like to do is ripping off the holders from one manufacturer and putting on some others. So let's say you have a pair of Reebok white K skates which are going to be fitted with the E-Pro holder. You want to remove that holder and put on the Bauer LS2 Tuuk holder. Is that something that's worth it? Is it going to be is it going to give you a significant enough change and feel for you to sort of justify doing that? The first problem with that, when you rip this holder off, as I'm sure a lot of you know, the different holders are fitted on with these bolts over here, which are called rivets. And even if the holder is the same size, of course you're going to want to get the same size holder to put back on, because it's coming from a different manufacturer, the rivets on the Bauer LS2 Tuuk holder aren't going to match up to the holes that are already drilled in the base of the skate, in the part of the skate that's called the outsole. So what you're going to have to do is drill more holes. So the first problem with doing that is that, number one, because you've drilled more holes in the base of the outsole, you ruin the structural integrity of the outsole, meaning that you make it less effective and less efficient and less stiff and rigid than it already was, which means that you're going to get straight away a reduction in the performance of the outsole and also the durability of the skate because you've added more holes into the bottom of it. The second point is because you've exposed the old holes that the old holder had. That means that because the boot's going to be on the ice, water is going to seep in. Because these holders aren't airtight, aren't watertight, water will be able to get in underneath it, which means that the boot is going to be more prone to rotting and rusting and being, again, breaking down earlier or prematurely than it should. So those are two sort of main points that you should keep in mind if you're going to be ripping off a holder to put on another one. And also the second thing, or rather the third thing, is going to be the price that it costs to do that. These Reebok white K skates cost roughly about £180 in the UK. Swapping them out for another blade holder and blade means that you have to buy a new holder, a new blade, and also pay for the job of having to have the holders exchanged, which can cost between £100 to £200 depending on where you go. So you have to sort of consider the price of the skate and also the price of the work that you're doing to the skates. In terms of looking at it, if it was a car, that's like having a pair of tyres on a car that costs £100 replaced and the tyres cost £500. That's not economical, it's not sort of logical to do something like that, and I would always recommend just buying a pair of Bauer skates to avoid this problem in the first place. So So one of the last points that we're going to touch on before we end this video is going to be when people say that the Bauer LS2 Tuuk holders give them a certain feeling and that's what they like, or a certain responsiveness on the ice and that's what they're used to. When we talk about the different feelings or sort of what you're used to on the ice, is the feeling or the performance that you're referring to coming from the holder itself, or is it coming from the boot, which is an important point to mention. The boot contributes a massive amount towards the sort of the angle that you're placed on the ice. Is it an aggressive stance or is it a straight up stance? All of these sort of come from the boot. Very, very little of this comes from the actual holder itself, which is a point to keep in mind. So just because you had a pair of Bauer skates and now you've moved on to, say, Easton, is it going to really be worth ripping off the holder to put on the Bauer holders back onto the Easton skate to give you a more traditional feel that you're used to? Because when I had the Easton EQ50 skates, I took off the Easton holder, which was these ones over here, and I had them replaced with the Bauer LS2 holder and an LS2 blade, not the Fusion blade. I went with the LS2 blade. And the feeling that I had from that, the difference that I felt from the Easton blade and the Bauer blade and the Easton holder and the Bauer holder was absolutely none. There was no difference whatsoever. My skating wasn't more agile, I wasn't quicker, it didn't make me feel more sort of confident and traditional on the ice. There was absolutely no difference whatsoever, which is my personal experience that I've had with messing around with these two different holders and blades. So that's something to keep in mind. It might just be worth sticking with the manufacturer if that's what you prefer. The different shapes of the blades can be very important to different kinds of skaters, especially if you're into freestyle or extreme skating. The shape of the blade can sort of either allow you to do tricks or restrict you from doing certain tricks. Personally, I like to have a nice heel, square-shaped heel of the blade, and also a nice sort of square-shaped toe. I don't like the toe to sort of cut straight up and just go straight up like with a very smooth finish. I like it to come out, kind of stick out a little bit. That allows me to sort of take very, very tight turns, deep tight turns, and also delayed crossovers while I'm really leaning onto the edge and really leaning onto the toe section of the blade, which is something that I personally like to do. So that's something to keep in mind. When you're looking at different manufacturers, different holders, just keep in mind the different shapes of the blades will give you different feelings and allow you to do different things on the ice. So that's definitely a point that you want to keep in mind. Another point that I'd like to also touch on is the different blades that you get on the different holders. You can see that what they do over here with the Easton holder is that they cut out a large section of blade at the top of the blade over there, just below where it meets the holder. And the reason for that is because when you're looking at the construction of a skate, skates are made up of lots of different pieces attached, stitched and glued together. The single most heaviest piece on the blade on a skate is going to be the blade. So by cutting out this portion over here, you're going to be reducing a hell of a lot of the weight, which is something that manufacturers like to do. But the problem with that is that because the blade is there's less of the blade, that makes the blade more prone to snapping. So if a puck hits that, it's not going to be as sort of stable and as durable as a one solid piece of metal, because it has that cutout at the top. It can make it more prone to snapping, which is something to keep in mind. So when you see the cutout designs on blades, just consider that. The next point is you're always going to want to look out for the different steels. Just make sure that you get a stainless steel and it's decently polished, which will sort of reduce the amount of drag that you get on the ice, and also because it's stainless steel, it'll combat rust a bit better than just your normal traditional steels, which is a bit better. And the Bauer LS2 Fusion blades, or the Tuuk Fusion blades, one of the issues with this is because they've got two different materials. They've got the aluminium on the top portion of the blade and the standard stainless steel on the bottom. Aluminium is much, much lighter, so that's how they've tried to reduce the weight rather than going for this old cutout method. But they've also coated the blades with something to sort of prevent them from rusting. But if the blade gets scratched, then it can make them prone to rusting, which is one of the feedbacks and criticisms that I've heard about these blades, and something to keep in mind when you're sort of selecting the different holders and blades and skates for yourself. I also wanted to say a massive thank you to Puckstop for sending us the blade holders, because without them this video wouldn't have been possible. So be sure to check them out. They're an ice hockey store in the UK. The link will be down below. You can get tons of equipment from them. So a massive thank you to Puckstop for making this video possible.